Hey there guys, Ignite Far here and welcome back to a brand new episode of Schooled for Game Show, where I go back to all of the old previous Skylanders games to put the Skylanders from those corresponding games into battle classes like the Senseis in the Skylanders Imaginators. Now today we're looking at knights, and so basically if there are a dozen knights in front of you. Now the typical story of Knights of the Round Table often has 25 knights in terms of the Winchester classical story that is, but there are several different iterations of this myth as there are with any other myth you can find in history. So naturally there is iterations where there are a dozen knights of a round table as well. So here we are with the dozen knights of Skylanders before Imaginators came around, and so clearly Activision stuck with a dozen knights to create their own Knights of the Round Table, and this case for Round Table is of course a portal of power. But enough of that has been said and done. We're actually going to now get in to the Skylanders of the Round Table, or the Knights of the Round Table I should say to be more exact, and talk about why they are knights. So from Spyro's Adventure, we have Chop Chop and Igniter. Now both of these characters are quite obviously knights. First of all is their weaponry, they both wield swords, and second of all is their armour. Chop Chop has armour over his skeletal body, and Igniter is a fire soul encapsulated inside of that enchanted armour, which is incredibly awesome to look at, mind you. But either way, their knightness, you could say, goes far beyond their aesthetics and weaponry, however, because they also have the typical personality traits of a knight as well. Not only does Igniter in particular have the voice, but both of them have a good idea of their own morals, and as such fight with honour and nobleness in battle. And so that honour and nobleness really does emphasise the fact that these two are of the knight battle class. Now we are going to skip Giants and head straight into Swap Force for two swappers, them being Doomstone and Blast Zone. These swappers rhymed, and I didn't even know it. But enough of that. Or I should have said even that these swappers are poets, and he didn't even know it. I had to say it's at the end to make it rhyme. But anyway, now with a professional, or a bit more professional even, rhyme out of the way, let's talk about why these two are knights. So clearly Blast Zone is a knight for similar reasons to Igniter. He is a fire spirit encapsulated inside that enchanted armour right there, and so the armour alone gives him the aesthetics of a knight, whilst his weaponry does not do that per se. But he also has personality traits of a knight as well, with him being honourable and noble in battle and everything. And Doomstone, whilst he doesn't necessarily have those traits, and neither does he have armour of the typical armour, typical knight sense even, he still does have armour over more. It's his rock armour, which I am classing for this. But what really makes this guy a knight is the fact that he has a little column thing up there and a shield. So this is a similar pose to how most other Skylanders with both a sword and a shield would hold those weaponry right there. So just because it's not a sword doesn't make it a knight's weapon, because he still smashes it down like it was a sword for that column and everything. So it's knighty enough for me, hence Doomstone is a knight in my personal opinion. But you guys can disagree with that, and that's entirely fine. Let me know about that in the comment section below, mind you. But enough of comment plugging, we're going to move from Swap Force onto the Trap Team cores involving Flipwreck, Blades and Trailblazer. Now Trailblazer is probably the one which you disagree with most out of all of these, but here is my reasoning as to why Trailblazer is a knight, and it's simply because, first of all, he's wearing armour, so not only is that a typical aesthetic of a knight, but he's also a horse, and he looks like a horse that would be rode by a knight like Igniter. So of course, horses were traditional animals for knights to ride, especially when it came to things like jousting and sports like that, where they would ride on horseback. And so Trailblazer being a direct reference to that, I feel, and having the aesthetics of a knight is enough to make him a knight, I feel. But anyway, moving on to the more obvious knights, Blades and Flipwreck. So Blades has a multitude of swords that he uses, and then he also has a sword tail as well as a huge chunk of armor that covers his entire body. Not only that, but he also speaks in a voice similar to that of the previously mentioned Igniter, and in that voice he can sense his personality traits of honor and nobleness. So yeah, Blades is a perfect knight, mind you, even if he doesn't use that sword tail apart from his jump attacks. And finally, there is Flipwreck, who is here for similar reasons to Doomstone and Chop Chop, because as I was showing off before, he has both a sword and a shield, both traditional weapons of a knight. So that alone is enough to make him a knight, the fact that he has that form of weaponry, mind you. But either way, now we're going to move on to the first two Trapmasters of the knight class, and that is... Don't fall over, Nightmare, please. That would be a nightmare. But anyway, we have Nightlight and Nightmare. Now, first of all, they literally have Knight in the name, so how could they not be knights? But second of all, they both wear armor. Like, Nightmare has her dark armor, and Nightlight has his owl-like armor. Now, Nightlight is more of a traditional knight because he stands for honor and nobleness more than what Nightmare does. But both of them have the huge Traptanium swords, so how could they not be knights in that case? And I was speaking before about how certain knights would have, of course, rode on horseback. Well, Nightmare is half horse, half whatever that other half is. So basically, technically, she is on horseback. So that does emphasize a trait of a knight as well. Hence, these are both great knights right here. But again, it's mostly the name and the weaponry, but the name does help. And then moving on to our last two Trapmasters, because for some reason there were so many Trapmasters with swords. Basically, we have Crypt King and Thunderbolt right here. I mean Crypt Crusher, I mean Crypt King. Yeah, I got it right the first time. But anyway, Crypt King and Thunderbolt both have armor, although Crypt King's is a whole lot more magnificent, you could say. And very similar to the previously mentioned Chop Chops as well. But Thunderbolt most certainly still does have it. But as always, they have swords just like the rest of the cast here, so that makes them great knights in that regard. Now, whilst Thunderbolt does stray away from the typical personalities of a knight, Crypt King, on the other hand, once again fights with nobleness and honor. And he also speaks like that of a knight, not only with what he says, but how he says it. Again, similar to the previously mentioned Igniter. I know I go back to this example, but I just think Igniter and Chop Chop being the first knights are the best examples of knights to come. But anyway, so now we have our last two knights of the dozen knights of the Round Table, and they are, of course, from Superchargers. And so, they are none other than Lava Lance Eruptor and High Volt. Now, Lava Lance Eruptor is clearly a knight because he has a lance, and I was kind of alluding to before about knights that fight, or not necessarily fight, but compete in sports like jousting. Well, if they would use lances like that, not to mention the actual moveset of Lava Lance Eruptor is also highly reflective of knights as well, the fact that he charges forward with his lance and everything. And then he also has armor, even if it is just armor to allow for his mohawk to show through. But then there is High Volt, who is a police officer, so you can't get any more honourable than a police officer. If they are out to protect you and to comfort you, and that's exactly what High Volt does. He's very good at his job. Not only that, but he has a shield and a staff-like weapon, which could classify as a misshapen sword, in my personal opinion. So not only does he fight with honour and nobleness, but he also has weaponry of a knight, and he has chunks of armour to match the aesthetics of knights also. But yes, that does it for our dozen knights of a Round Table. Although, clever viewers would have noticed that we do not have 12 knights here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Well, that's because in the Knights of the Round Table legends, sure, whilst there was a dozen knights, there was also King Arthur. So, King Arthur, I feel, is represented by Igniter, not only because he's my favourite, but as I was saying before, Igniter and Chop Chop are both from Spice Adventures, so they were the very first knights introduced into the franchise. And since Igniter is a starter pack character for that same game, I just feel like he has that little bit more of an impact And he's my favourite, so again, that's something that most certainly helps him out. So yes, you can't have Knights of the Round Table without King Arthur, so we now have King Arthur and our dozen knights that are actually a dozen of them this time. But that does it for today's Schooled episode. I'll be seeing you tomorrow for the next one, but until such a moment, peace.